Welcome to another Ask Tech here on GMBN, where you get to ask us loads of questions using the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech, where we answer as many questions as we can. And I believe you've got our first question now.
I do indeed. It's from D. Towler, who says, the anodizing on the back side of my dropper has worn off completely. I service it regularly and it still functions perfectly, but is this normal to wear down on a 2-year-old dropper? Should I replace it soon? Good question, really good question. Now I'm assuming, so I've got a dropper here. Now I'm assuming you've not got anything that's rubbing it or anything like that, and you are definitely servicing it, because usually you do get signs of wear on your anodizing if you don't service it. But seeing as you're saying it's just at the back, I'm inclined to believe you. It's just that there might be a bit of binding in your dropper post, and this just can happen. If you imagine a dropper post that's quite long, and if you imagine that maybe your seat post is quite slack, there's a lot of pressure at these points, and you can cause a bit of binding and a bit of wear on that stanchion. And this is a reason why a lot of dropper posts are 250 to 300 pound rider weight limits on there, so that you don't put too much weight or too much pressure on these moving parts. Now, this can happen in shocks as well. Sometimes we get binding in rear shocks when suspension puts a lot of pressure on them. Is it a problem? I mean, if it's functioning perfectly, at the moment, no. It is wearing down some material, and if that keeps going, it can wear down enough to create grooves, maybe pull some air or water or dirt into it, which then would obviously make it not work too well in the future. But if it's not doing that right now, it's not a problem right now. You're just going to keep an eye on it until it starts to become a problem, and then you're probably going to need to replace it, yeah. Although if you want to save a bit of money, sometimes there are dropper posts out there where you can replace parts, stanchions for example, rather than the whole unit. So that could be a little bit of a money-saving tip.
Yeah, I think just briefly to add, some systems have got a seal cartridge on the inside, and if it sounds like that's what he's got. So as you said, it won't matter. You'll get grit in there which will wear seals. If it's not one of those ones that's using an independent sort of cartridge sealed on the inside, then it will cause an issue. But if it's still working, as you've said, sounds great. Okay, got a great question here from Boho Johansson. Good name. Are metal tyre levers really that bad? I mean, short answer, yeah, probably they are, actually. I've seen in workshops in the past where people have used tyre levers, metal ones, and they've punched holes into the rim.
Oh.
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy to do. With a really strong tyre lever and poor technique, you can go wrong. So yeah, metal is really tough. The tools are often steel. Rims, if they're a metal rim, they're often alloy, which is softer, and you can just lever through it. Yeah, especially if the sort of tyre and rim combination are really tight. So yeah, plastic is better. I think sometimes some combinations are extremely tight, and even I've snapped tyre levers that I thought, well, I would never snap plastic ones. But yeah, so practice. Sometimes you might need less rim tape than you think you might need, so you shouldn't really need to have these humongous metal tyre levers to punch holes in things. I guess that would be my kind of loop back, is if you're having to use metal tyre levers, check if you've got lots of rim tape or you've got cloth rim tape, check if that's too tight. I guess other reasons, if you've got a carbon rim, then if we've talked about how aluminium, which is relatively tough, can easily be pierced by a steel tyre lever, yeah, carbon isn't going to work with a steel tyre lever. It is just going to break. So just be really careful.
If you're struggling to get a tyre off and you're thinking you need steel, it's never usually the way. You either need more leverage from a longer plastic lever, or you're going to have to think outside the box, like using vices to grab hold of tyres and leveraging the wheel out of it that way. Never go for steel, in my opinion. Okay, my next question is from who says, my RockShox Zeb made a puff sound when I compressed it fast, like air is leaking or something. It's been serviced, it's had new seals. Why is it making that sound? If that puff, well, it kind of made me giggle thinking that it would make a puff noise, but if it's making a slurpy or a shushing noise, it might sound a little bit like it's air coming out, but actually that's just the mechanisms, the valves, the shims in the damper going through the oil. So obviously in a fork, certainly an air fork, well, most forks actually, well, most modern forks will have a damper. And what that's doing is trying to control the rate at which your forks rebound or return back to their normal shape. And it's doing that by having shims move through oil. And some forks just make a lot of noise when those metal pieces go through the oil, and you will hear it. Some are worse than others. RockShox are quite known for being noisy. And in fact, RockShox even addressed that with the new Charger 3.1, where they've said this is almost silent, or at least much quieter than previous. So if it's a slurping noise when it's moving, I'm inclined to say that's not a problem. You shouldn't worry too much about it.
Actually, I've had this on my Zebs because I know that recently there's been a kind of like disagreement between RockShox and Fox about what you call the bleed ports on the back of the fork. Whichever the name is, mine, for just one random reason, was slightly undone. I think I must have knocked it in the car. So there was a little bit of a hiss of air as that air balanced out. So make sure you tighten those up. And depending on which system you've got on your RockShox forks, you might have to use an Allen key, or you can tighten it or put the cover on. So that might be the other thing.
Good
so
knowledge.
Yeah. Great question here from Tudor3, Kojanu 1. What are the most common causes for a leaking shock? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of places where you could leak oil if something has gone wrong in your shock. If you're talking about it's on the kind of like shaft of the shock, so where you're seeing maybe you've got an O-ring to check sag or check if you're bottoming out, some of it you will get some oil there, and that's just because of how the setup is set up. There'll be probably a foam ring inside which is soaked in oil to keep everything really smooth, and then just a wiper seal or potentially a garter seal, so that's one of those little springs on it, and that means that everything should stay airtight and oil tight. But often, yeah, you'll get some leakage. If you're getting lots and lots of oil, yeah, something has broken inside, which, having done the bottom out video, I now know is actually relatively easy if you've not correctly set your sag and you go through a massive compression, because a lot of air shocks, the little rubber bumper inside, the small bottom out bumper, you see them on coil shocks, they're really quite beefy, but in air shocks they're very, very small, and it's easy to, well, just destroy it. The other thing it could be is just over time, it could perish. That will happen, unfortunately. It's one of the reasons why Fox have about a 30-hour sort of air can service. RockShox is a little bit longer, it's about 50 hours. But yeah, when any of the parts, any of the seals inside the shock sort of perish or get damaged, then it just means oil can go in places where it probably shouldn't be, and thus it will be on your bike. So hopefully that helps. It can come from lots of places.
All right, my question from Jeff MTB in VA says,
Hi, Jeff. He's ace. He's in the comments all the time.
Okay.
Jeff, hello.
Hi, Jeff. So he has a Vitus Escarp CRX from 2023 with hazed minions. Nice. I want to upgrade my rear rotor from 180 to 203. How would I figure out what post mount I can get? Okay, let's demystify this. So the adapter is literally adapting or converting, if you like, what your frame or your forks is originally to what you want. So if your frame is a 180, then and you want to move up to a 200, for example, that's 20 mil difference. So you need a 20 mil converter. Or a lot of the time when you search for this online or go into a bike shop, it will just say 180 to 200 converter anyway. So it's really easy to figure out. You're not using a converter to convert from the disc you have, because if you already have one of these sat underneath your brake caliper, it means you've already converted. So you need to know what your original frame is or your original fork is. So you're moving from 180, and I've had a look, and I believe the Escarp is originally a 180 frame, and you're moving to a 203. So you will be looking for a disc brake mount adapter, 180 to 203. I wouldn't recommend getting a 200, and then you can put some spacers in there, but sometimes it's not great. It's just as easy and costs as much to find yourself a proper 203 rotor, in my opinion. Shimano do them a lot because it's kind of a standard of theirs for the 203.
It is. I would say the only thing to be careful of is that the Hayes caliper is, due to the shape of it and where the second piston sits, it's a bit like some of the Magura ones. If you get certain shapes of adapter, it won't fit. I know this, having learned the very hard way. So I would definitely recommend getting the Hayes ones, or ones that say somewhere in the kind of the details that it's approved for a Hayes brake, because the shaping of it is just a little bit different. But 203. Good brakes.
And just for anyone else who's out there looking for mounts and adapters and have found this information, just be aware that there is post mount and flat mount out there as well, which is a different style of mounting for calipers. Most mountain bikes are post mount, but I believe there are some fancy lightweight XC bikes out there, and definitely some gravel bikes that are flat mount, so keep an eye out for that.
Great question here from Carbon Toe. Cool. I bought a new handlebar, however, it can only be cut down to 760. I normally run 740. Will I be able to compensate by switching my stem from a 40 to a 35? The new bar's the same sweep, same rise as my current ones. Okay, right, I'm trying to just do the mental maths of his new bars. Right, so he wants to have a narrower position, but his bar's going to be cut down to 760, and he wants to put a 40 on for a 35? Is that the right way around?
No, he's swapping his 40. He thinks that bringing his stem in and making a shorter stem will give him the same effect as bringing his hands in on the handlebars.
Right. I mean, it's sort of the inverse and sort of opposite, I guess. The shorter stem is going to increase the speed of your steering to a degree. So there's not illogic there, because actually when your hands go out, that does slow it down. But in terms of where your hands are, this is a real tricky one. It's a good question.
I would say you're still going to be wider on your hands than before. If you're bringing in your stem, you're just bringing in the reach, and your hands will still be wide. It's possible that you might like it, but you're still going to have a wide position. And I think when you move up a size, you're going to be using different muscles. It's going to be a little bit achy. You're going to want to try it out if you're on board with that, because even the slightest change. I know it's only 10 mil, but even the slightest change can sort of really affect your body, and you might have to ease yourself into it slowly.
Yeah, I think the width. Some of the width logic is interesting because we kind of apply it and bring it across from road riding, where we're in a quite static position, and when you change bar width there, or you change sort of like bar reach, which is sort of like the way it moves, there are some logic where you're like kind of, I'm pulling myself forward, so I'll have to change the rest of me. So going wider often does sort of pull you forward, so I can understand the logic of wanting to move to a smaller stem. I mean, what's interesting is that the sweep and rise, because it's a wider bar, does mean it's not going to be the same. So because you've got 20 mil extra of the bar coming back to you, it might not be that far off. The other thing to play with before you change stem length, because we're changing similar thing in terms of changing cockpit length, is maybe just trying rollback. So kind of like having a look at your rollback position. So sort of normally, as a rough rule of thumb, we have rollback where the bars are sort of where the rise is. If you're looking at a cross sort of side section of it, you're looking at that in line with your head angle. But you could try it a little bit further rolled back. I mean, it depends on the shape of the bar. There's so many factors. I think play with that first.
Or play with one thing at a time.
Agreed.
To see what works.
That would be key. Exactly. But let us know how you get on. Really interesting. Great question.
Also, if you can't return these bars, there are some grips out there that do kind of add like 5 mil onto the end that might actually give you a little bit more of a buffer to take it closer to where you want. Oh no, he's trying to come in.
Yeah, he's bringing it in.
So that doesn't help at all. Ignore me.
No, but I think that's what's good, is that if you're right to talk about some grips that you can slide all the way on, so you could return to a 750, or try that as intermediate for a little bit. Make sure you've got a bar plug. That's an essential. Don't go without that, and just see what it's like. To be fair, I was riding a bike with very, very wide bars. I'm a narrow bar sort of guy, and I was a bit like, actually, they're quite nice
So
on
this
the right
speech
bike.
you gave me in the corridor the other day about running bars too wide.
I don't think I said they were too wide. I think I said 750 is pretty good, but it is really personal. But try them at 760. let us know how you get on. It'd be great to know.
And if you have any burning questions now after watching this, then don't forget to use hashtag Ask GMBN Tech down in the comments of any of our channel's videos, and we'll try and pick it up and answer it for you.